Hi, welcome back to Football's 12th Man podcast. As ever, I'm your host, Dan Potts, and you are joining me yet again for another Arsenal series. We're doing an all time Arsenal 11 combined with different topics. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure that you are liking and subscribing to this channel. I want to try and get up to 7K as quickly as possible as we can race to 10K. Guys, I've already done an Arsenal best 11 and an Arsenal worst 11. If you haven't done that so already, go check it out. They're literally like 25-minute streams. And I'm more interested really in understanding where you're coming from as listeners. What era do you come from? Where are you watching from? All that kind of stuff. So please make sure you're commenting on what you think your best and worst Arsenal 11 is. Today we're doing something a little bit different. This is going to be the most underrated Arsenal 11. And it's players really that I think deserve credit and never really always get the credit they deserve. And you'll see as I go through some of the players that they're all fantastic, but sometimes they were always overlooked by somebody that they thought perhaps was better. And sometimes I think we look at players and think they're quality, but actually they were more than quality. In some ways, they were elite in their position, or they were so important to Arsenal. So that's why I wanted to put this together, because I feel like there's definitely shows I've seen before, and I've done one myself, picking the top 5 players, but actually picking a 1 to 11 of it was actually quite easy. I'm not going to lie. It was easy because there was so many options that it actually become hard to pick just 11. So it'd be really good to get your understanding of where you think I've gone wrong, where you agree, where you disagree. And I'd be really interested to see your in the comment section, your 1 to 11 of this. So without further ado, in goal, I have to pick this guy because I believe personally he's forgotten about completely. And the reason he's forgotten about is because at the time we had one of the best goalkeepers I've ever seen. And I'm, of course, talking about this guy. Now, Alex Meninga was a massive reason as to why Arsenal won the double in the 97-98 season. He came as a youngster from Austria. Nobody really knew much about him. And when David Seaman got that injury, everybody was deflated, let's say. I thought he was magnificent. I thought he was absolutely superb. And it was a shame we couldn't keep hold of him. It was. But I understood that David Seaman was number one and he was never going to displace him of that, but I do believe that he deserves a hell of a lot more credit than everyone's ever given him credit for. And he was actually playing till the age of 39. I think he came back to Liverpool at the age of his late 30s. Was at Juventus, at Siena, was over in Italy, I think over at Germany at one stage as well. A very, very good goalkeeper. And I remember the penalty save against West Ham. I remember him keeping us in games. I remember making unbelievable saves, all when David Seaman was out. And people think of that double winning season in 97-98 as one of the best Arsenal sides. Well, he was a massive part of that. So Alex Meninga, for me, I think rightly deserves to be in the goalkeeper slot for the all-time Arsenal underrated 11. Alex Meninga, I take my hat off to you. And do you know what? That is such an underrated goalkeeper kit, that as well. So fair play to him. FA Cup winner, title winner. Well played, Alex Meninga. Deserves to be in there in goal. There was some I could have. I actually did think about picking Jens Lehmann because I think a lot of people underrated him for how great he was because of some of the madness and the craziness that he actually did have. But I had to go with Alex Meninga. There was nobody else for me. At right back, I found this really easy. Um, I did think of Lauren because a lot of people always overlook him and go for Lee Dixon or Pat Rice in all-time 11s. I thought he was unbelievable for us in the Invincible season. But he does get a lot more credit than the player I've gone for. I've gone for Mr. Consistent. Within the Emirates era, for me, the best right back. I've gone for Bakary Sagna. I think with Sagna, you rarely saw a performance from him that was under a 7 or 8 out of 10. He was so consistently good. A real good person to have in the dressing room, somebody that just got on with his job. He just seemed to me to be really professional and actually left Arsenal after the FA Cup uh, winning season. And if he would have stayed for a couple more, he probably would have got a couple more FA Cups. But obviously went to Man City to win stuff with them. And do you know what? I don't blame him. If I'm honest with you, I probably would have done the same if I was at Arsenal and see where they were going and see where Man City were going. I can understand where the ambition comes from to win. You know, I'm a winner myself. So I look at things differently than some of the fans. But Bakary Sagna, I don't think has any ill feeling with the fans after him leaving Arsenal. He's not a Alexis Sanchez, Robin Van Persie, Ashley Cole, Adebayor. He's not one of those. He is probably, in my opinion, the most underrated right back that Arsenal have ever had. I think he could do everything. He was great defensively. I thought he was very underrated, or criminally underrated, in fact, in his tackling and his aerial ability, because he's a player that wasn't exactly tall, but always did well in the air. I thought. Got a couple of headers. I remember. Well, one he scored in the North London derby. Um, and going forward, there was nobody better, really. He was absolutely superb. Always preferred Sanya to Bellerin. I thought he was a better right back. I thought he was better defensively, which, to be fair to Bellerin, bless him, wasn't hard. But he was certainly a better crosser of the football. Bellerin at times struggled with his crossing. And I think for me, Sagnar, absolutely superb going forward as well as defensively. So I thought that was an easy choice for me. And he walked in. Um, I can't lie. I have gone for a left back that I think has probably proven me wrong the most. I signed this guy and I remember thinking, I made my mind up. I think you're a weak link. And the season after that, I thought, oh, okay, you're doing all right. Oh, actually, you're good. Oh, wow. And you're consistent as well. And I thought there were some leadership qualities from this guy as well. It just seemed to me as if he enjoyed being at the Arsenal. And I looked to him a few times over the last, I'd say 5, 6 years. And he was the one that was literally communicating. He looks like one of the leaders on the pitch. I'm, of course, talking about Nacho Monreal. This player is so underrated and was able to play in a back three, at left back, sometimes in a back two, believe it or not, but always gave 110%. And I love players like that. He came to Arsenal from Malaga, I believe, along with Santi Cazorla. And I remember thinking, well, I love Santi, but this guy's a little bit weak. And he just got better and better and better. And I thought he was really consistent at the end. And he was never mentioned in one of the greats. He was always behind the likes of Ashley Cole and Kenny Sansom and Nigel Winterburn. And do you know what? Perhaps rightly so. But I still thought he was one consistent left back who seemed to me to just get a little bit better with age. It's weird how players do that. Sometimes it happens naturally. Sometimes players go from 21 and by the time they hit 25, they're fantastic. It seems with Nacho Monreal that from 25 to 32, he just got better and better. So for me, I've been a real fan of his. And it was actually a shame for me to see him leave. When we signed Kieran Tierney, I thought, keep Nacho Monreal and sell Kolasinac or put him on loan. But we actually got rid of Kolasinac. We got rid of Monreal to Real Sociedad. And that was a bad move for me because Nacho Monreal was a much better left back than Kolasinac and would have been awesome cover for an injury-prone Kieran Tierney at the time. But unfortunately, we had Kolasinac and the rest is history. I'm a big fan of Nacho Monreal. I think he's always spoke highly of the Arsenal, and I think he's a player that we actually did miss for a couple of seasons when he went. So big up Nacho because I'm a big fan. At centre back, I've picked the two centre backs that everybody forgets about when they're picking an all-time 11. Whenever people talk about the back five of Arsenal, the Nigel Winterburns, the Lee Dixons, the David Seamans, they talk about Tony Adams, and then there's who else do we put in with them? Well, I've put them both into my underrated 11 because I think they both deserve to be. The first one, of course, is Steve Bold. I think Steve Bold was probably one of the best signings that was made by George Graham. Bought him and Lee Dixon from Stoke, I believe, and Nigel Winterburn from Wimbledon. It's unbelievable to think that that back line was bought by QPR, David Seaman, one through the ranks of Tony Adams, two from Stoke and one from Wimbledon, and turned it into the best back five that there was in Europe at the time. Unbelievable. Credit needs to be given to George Graham for that. And Steve Bold, for me, I think you have to look at him and say that everything he did was so important to Arsenal, but he was never, ever the one you talked about. It was always Adams. It was always, oh, look at Winterburn's screamer against Chelsea, or Lee Dixon, absolutely Mr. Consistent, love him. Steve Bold wasn't really spoken about as much as I believe. And I'm amazed he didn't do enough for England. I think he got a couple of caps, but it was always overlooked by the likes of Des Walker and others. And let's be honest, there's been some shockers actually over that era. Do you know what I mean? That actually got it, like Carlton Palmer, people like that got in ahead of Steve Bold. Come on. Like, seriously? Let's look at how good this guy was consistently. And we'll always remember, won't we? The assist for Tony Adams' goal against Everton. That was Steve Bold who saw that pass and he flicks it over, and the rest is history. I think Steve Bold deserves an unbelievable amount of credit, and I was a big, big fan. Of course, when he retired, he then went into coaching and come back to Arsenal. At one stage was our assistant manager. Things didn't really go that well for him in certain aspects of the game. I don't think that him and Arsene Wenger had the relationship that perhaps people thought that they did. And I saw him as a little bit of a quiet figure, a little bit of a yes man, and I don't really think that Arteta needs somebody like that. So perhaps that's why it hasn't worked out for him long term. But a great player, albeit, and he deserves to be in this side without a doubt. For me, the next one's easy. An iconic picture. Martin Keown, a player that seemed to stay at Arsenal for absolutely amazing amount of time. Probably 15 to 20 years at the club in the end, obviously with a spell at Everton in between it. I'm a big fan of what I saw from Martin Keown. I loved everything about his leadership qualities. I loved his passion. I loved his desire. I loved the fact he wanted to win. That mentality definitely had an influence on the others coming through. When you hear stories about Martin Keown telling people we don't lose today, it's the North London derby, you're playing for the Arsenal now, grabbing older people by the scruff of the neck and telling them that they can do better. I just love everything about this guy, and I feel like that is definitely something that's missing in nowadays football. You do see little glimpses of it, but nowhere near enough for me. And the rivalry at this time between Arsenal and Manchester United was huge, and it's something I don't think will ever be replicated. People talk about Pep and Klopp now, and Liverpool and City. Sorry, guys, like it's nowhere near. I'm not saying that because I'm a gooner. I'm saying that because it's fact. You know, Pep and Klopp hugging each other and all the fans swapping shirts with each other. You never had that Arsenal Man United. They all hated each other. They all wanted to win and win only. They do anything they can to win. Look at his face. Look at what Keown's doing there because Ruud van Nistelrooy's tried to cheat his way through a game and he's not got away with it. So that's basically what's happening there. Is he screaming in his face? Now, that was out of order. We got our fines for it, so be it. But they would do it the next game, trust me. That was what that side were about. It was a togetherness. And Martin Keown was a massive part of that invincible season. And people forget the games that he played for us and how important he was, not just in that season, but throughout. I was a big fan of Martin Keown. And again, actually played more times for England than Steve Bold, from what I can think, but never really got the credit. And perhaps he came at the time where there was the likes of Campbell, Terry, Ferdinand, Adams. There was quite a Carragher. All of these guys coming through, and Keown was in and around that England squad, but was never really a first team player because of that. But you know what? Did an unbelievable job for the Arsenal. So fair play to you, Martin. Absolutely love you. Let's go into midfield now. I'm going to bring this guy up, and I'm going to say it now. The most underrated footballer to wear the Arsenal shirt for me. Whenever he wasn't there, we missed him. Whenever we weren't seeing this guy's face, we understood what he did, which a lot of the time people didn't realise. And I'm, of course, talking about Gilberto Silva. Now, when Vieira was in the side, everybody thought he was the key and he was the dog. And that's, you know what? He was the big dog, without a doubt. But this guy was so important next to him. So important. And we had other players, for sure, alongside Vieira. But nobody could do what they do, what this guy could do. This guy is the closest Sergio Busquets of his time that I can think of. He is a player that if you watch a game of football, you probably won't see too much about what Gilberto Silva does. So what I did was I watched Gilberto Silva instead of the football game. And then I understood a game of football. My God, what an underrated player. Everything he did was the horrible job that nobody else wanted to do. This guy did it, but he enjoyed doing it. And he did it to the best of his ability. And I didn't see many poor games from Gilberto Silva on the whole. The other thing I have to give him a compliment for, and it's probably one of the biggest compliments I can give him, is in that era, in that picture, he was the captain. He didn't once complain when he was dropped out the side. He was the ultimate professional and a player that I felt could have gone on for a couple more seasons at the Arsenal and captained us alongside Cesc Fabregas. When Flamini come into the side alongside him, he didn't complain. He said he wanted first team football and he went. But my God, what a miss and what a player. I absolutely loved Gilberto Silva. And funny enough, when we signed him, not a lot of people will remember this, but Emerson was playing in the Brazil national side. And before one of the games of the friendlies, before the squad was announced, he went in goal and was mucking around in training in the warm-up and he broke his arm. And therefore, the Brazilian manager at the time called up Gilberto Silva. And that was the only reason that Arsenal signed him, because he would never have been spotted by Arsene Wenger if it wasn't for that World Cup. So we got him in that 2001-2002 season. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable for me. I absolutely love everything about him, and I think he deserves to be in that side. Alongside him, is a player you all know very, very well. It is our sporting director, Edu. He, for me, will always go down as one of the most underrated because he was in and around players that were just unfortunately better than him. I think if he was in any other team, he would have absolutely been seen as a legend because I look at what he did on the ball. His left foot was magnificent. He scored unbelievable goals. And I remember when Gilberto Silva was out for a few games and he scored two against Celta Vigo in the Champions League. And I remember thinking, yeah, this player's really come on the scene now. And again, like Gilberto, I understood why he wanted to go. He wanted first team football. And I think that picture there, in fact, is his last ever game for Arsenal. I think it was a penalty he scored against West Brom at Highbury. And I remember thinking that day, such a shame he's going. Went back to Spain, did some good things, but never what he could do in an Arsenal shirt. And I always thought it was a shame that he never was able to hold down a position. But let's be honest, that team was very difficult to force your way into with Gilberto Silva and Vieira there and Fabregas and Flamini coming through. I think he realised that his time was up and he needs to go to play for somewhere else. But my God, what a player. And I've got to say, he's done some bad things at Arsenal, in my opinion. He's got some things wrong. He's got a lot right, though. And a lot of people have to give him credit for that. A lot of the signings have actually been really good. And I know a lot of credit goes to Mikel Arteta, but you have to look at both of them. You have to look at Edu as well. Because whenever Edu gets something wrong, you can't sit there and say that Arteta didn't get it wrong either. When something goes right, you can't just give it all to Mikel Arteta. It has to be Edu as well. And I think some of the signings they've managed to get into the door have been fantastic. You know, he's been responsible for some of the young players like Marquinhos, etc., of this late last window. But he is responsible for Gabriel Martinelli. He's also responsible for Thomas Partey, Gabriel, Ben White, Ramsdale, Tomiyasu. You look at Fabio Vieira, Martin Erdegaard. Most of this current side right now is to do with him. And of course, you can't forget Gabriel Jesus. I don't care what anybody says. Mikel Arteta, yes, massive, massive part of why he's come to Arsenal. But Edu as well. If the rumours are to be told about the truth of Mudryk and Danilo, apparently Edu's trying to work his magic in there as well. And long may it continue if we can get the players in that is needed. But Edu deserves to be in here for sure. Now we move out to the wide areas, and I've gone for two wide players that I think sometimes go under the radar. I think they were seen as absolutely superb players when they were at Arsenal, but I don't always think they get the credit perhaps that they deserve because of the likes of Overmars, Lundberg, Pires, Reyes, Van Persie, Arshavin, Nasri, players like that we had that at either at the time or before or after them that people always think of when you think of wide players. But the one I have to mention first of all is this guy. I think Ray Parlour could play anywhere, if I'm honest with you. He could play as a wing back, a right wing, a right forward, a wide forward, a left winger. He could play in the middle and be a centre midfielder. He could be more attacking minded. I remember the hat trick he scored against Newcastle, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy's really proven himself now. He had a brilliant season in '98, an even better season in 2002. And then, of course, that iconic picture here, scoring in the FA Cup final against Chelsea. Wow. Famous bit of commentary from Tim Lovejoy. It's only Ray Parlour, and he smashes it in the top corner. For me, this guy deserves to be in there. I thought he was an unbelievable talent at Arsenal, and I think he's one that probably England let get away a bit. I understand that David Beckham was superb, but I think there was an option for him to at least be in the squad and be called up ahead of some of the others. I was a real big fan of Ray Parlour, and to be fair, massive part of the Invincibles season. Absolutely superb. Really, really good. And I think personally, Arsene Wenger was probably the best thing that happened to him, but also Dennis Bergkamp was. I think Dennis Bergkamp was one player that lifted those around him. And Ray Parlour was one that was before Bergkamp's time. You got to remember he was a youngster in the early 90s. And then he was being brought up by the Tuesday night club. And you look at the um, the other players around him then. Dennis Bergkamp was a focal point and a role model to him, and I think he came at the right time. And I believe personally that he improved Ray Parlour's game. I really do. The other player that I've gone for, this is a player that I don't think always gets a mention and is still playing, by the way. I think someone who scored in massive games, always big games. I remember scoring in Champions Leagues against Barcelona, Man City, Liverpool, United, Chelsea, Liverpool. Over 100 goals for Arsenal. Theo Walcott. I understand the frustrations. I understand he perhaps didn't hit the heights that everybody expected him to when he signed as a 16, 17-year-old. But I always saw talent straight away. Pace, power, definite finishing, understanding of how to link up with players. Robin van Persie said he was his favourite player to play with. I think he gave him the most assists at the club. I think he deserves a lot more of a mention. I understand it was like 100 goals in 10 seasons, but it didn't actually work out to be 10 goals a season because Theo Walcott was injured for, out of his 10 years at Arsenal, probably, I would say, 5 of them. He pretty much had an injury. So to score that many goals, I think he deserves a hell of a lot of credit. Also, what you got to remember with Theo Walcott is the pressure on his shoulders. As a 16, 17-year-old kid that was told to go to England in 2006 as a youngster, all of a sudden, there's so much pressure on you. At the time, Wayne Rooney, who was coming through and always had them pressure on his shoulders, he kind of took a little bit off of that. I think he took a bit of that off Wayne Rooney because a lot of people were looking at him to be the next best thing. And at the time, I don't think we really had that much talent coming through. Around 2008 to 2010, England were actually not that great. We had players like Chris Smalling and Phil Jones in the side. We weren't really a side that I looked at and went, wow. Gareth Barry was our midfielder with Michael Carrick. It was like, apart from Gerrard and Lampard, who are getting on a bit now, who else is actually coming through? Who's the next Wayne Rooney? Who's the next Beckham? Who's the next Rio and Terry? And it took a while, really, for England to actually find those talent, and we've got that now. But Theo Walcott, for me, deserves a hell of a lot of praise. Having that many goals in an Arsenal shirt, to have the figures and being the likes and the number, the greats at Arsenal, he is in that amongst that now. So I think he deserves to be in this underrated 11. I think he was underrated. I feel like personally he could have been played as a centre forward a lot more, particularly with Olivier Giroud. I felt that them two could have been playing off of each other a lot more. And he seemed to be happy on the right wing. Having said that, to score 100 goals at the right as a right winger, yeah, fair play to you, Theo. I think you deserve to be in this team. Last two, I've gone with a 4-4-2. And this player might shock you. It might shock you that I've put him in. It might shock you that you think he's quality. Everyone loved him. Do you know what? Everyone loved all these players. My point is, he was not nowhere near loved as much as some people believe, because I feel that I love this guy, by the way. I'm not saying fans didn't love him, but I feel personally like he was great. He was more than great. And at one stage was just unbelievable. And I don't think anybody really saw him as that. And the reason I say that is because Bergkamp, Henry, you're looking at all these players, Pires, and you're thinking, wow, this player I think had moments which wowed me more than any other player, particularly in the 90s and 2000s. And I'm, of course, talking about Kanu. Now, that goal there, that celebration there, is actually the flick against Middlesbrough at their ground, which was a cross from Lee Dixon and a bit of work from Lee Dixon and Parler down the right-hand side. And the cross has come to Kanu, and he's literally just flicked it, and it's gone in. And I just remember sitting there thinking, wow. And apparently he'd been practicing it in training and all this. And then I see him literally flick the ball over the head of Luke Young against Spurs at White Hart Lane and bury it in the bottom corner against Ian Walker. And I remember thinking, this guy is so skillful. He's so talented. Went on to have a really good career. Obviously came over from Ajax into Milan, Arsenal. And then, of course, from there went to Portsmouth and did some amazing stuff. West Brom, I think he was at as well, still scoring goals. I'm thinking, wow, Kanu at one stage was like the top scorer in the Premier League by like Christmas, I think it was, for Portsmouth. And I was like, wow, this player's still got it. But of course, the one that I'll always remember for Kanu is the hat-trick against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. The first goal, superb. The second, well, excellent. That third goal, I've never seen anything like it. The pass from, I believe, Davor Schuker at the time was so bad that it actually took Kanu out wide and it made the goal even better. So from a bad pass from Suka, it had actually been controlled, taken round one of the defenders. Ed De Hoy, I remember, comes out from Chelsea and he just takes it round and he's on the unbelievable narrowest of angles with Leboeuf and Desailly running back on the goal line, and he just slots it home, picks his slot perfectly. And for me, that will always be one of the best hat-tricks I've seen in an Arsenal shirt. Kanu was so underrated, it was unbelievable. How skillful this guy is just madness to me. Absolutely madness. I did think about putting Eduardo Silva in there, but I felt like he was rated. He broke his leg and couldn't really show why he was underrated, but still one of the best finishers I've seen in an Arsenal shirt. I mean, every time the ball went through, it was goal. We knew it was. Unbelievable finisher, up there with like Robbie Fowler for me. So, yeah, Kanu gets it. Much appreciated what he did. I did think about Sylvain Wiltord because, again, a little bit in the bracket of Carnu. He was great, but never really mentioned in the same brackets as the legends of Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp and, of course, Ian Wright. So I've gone for Carnu. Now I've left the best till last. Now, I did say earlier that Gilberto Silva was the best and most underrated player. And it was very, very hard for me to pick between him and this guy. I think this guy is probably one of the most underrated footballers there's been, if I'm honest with you. And of course, I'm talking about Olivier Giroud. Now, it's unbelievable timing that only the other night he put England out of the World Cup with yet another headed goal using the attributes that he believes he has to the best of his ability. That scorpion kick's one of the best goals I've seen at the Emirates. I think it will go down as one of the best goals in Premier League history. Again, a bad cross from Alexis Sanchez, which actually allows the ball to go behind him, and to improvise and do what I think is one of the best piece of individual skill I've seen was just incredible. Olivier Giroud was never, ever a player that had the technical abilities of Dennis Bergkamp. He never had the all-round package of an Alexis Sanchez or a Thierry Henry. Some would say he wasn't even technically as good as somebody like Mesut Ozil, who has, good games and bad games in an Arsenal shirt, in my opinion. But Olivier Giroud, I mean, he literally could flick on, could head, could hold the ball up, and could first-time finish. And he used those attributes to produce one of the most incredible CVs you're ever going to see from a footballer. That he has the chance to win yet another World Cup, one of which he's already won. He's won a Europa League. He's won a Champions League. He's won a FA Cup. He's won a League Cup. He's won, what else has he won? Serie A. What have I missed? He's pretty much won everything. It is quite incredible. And when you look at what he was about towards, I would say, 2013, 14, a lot of people were hating on him because we needed a few goals that season. Leicester, it was 15, 16. We needed his goals to try and beat Leicester for the league title, and it wasn't about. We needed another striker. He couldn't deliver, and he had a poor season. That does not mean that he doesn't deserve to be in here. He was underrated. A lot of people felt that he was a frustrating lamppost of a striker. I had times where I thought, oh, I'm getting a bit frustrated with Giroud now. We need to play somebody off him. Let's play Podolski off of him. Let's play Walcott off of him. We need him because he's a focal point. He was a man mountain of a player, and I always liked him, but I never loved him. And I kind of feel like I'm loving him now. I feel like we needed a Giroud to be kept. I understand he had to go for the domino effect of bringing Aubameyang in, but I'd rather have had Giroud than Lacazette. I much rather would have. I certainly would have rather have Giroud than Lucas Perez and all these players that we've had before and are after him. I think Olivier Giroud was actually a big miss. And if we had somebody like that now with aerial threat, with link-up play, to bring on with 20 minutes to go, I think it's just what Mikel Arteta would need. I absolutely love the player, 35 years old, still doing it at an elite level. And I hope that what he did the other night is what he does to Tottenham in a few weeks' time when they play him in the Champions League. Olivier Giroud 100 deserves to be in there. I can't stress enough how great I think the guy is. And unfortunately, that come to haunt us yet again. France versus England. That is my underrated 11. Let's put it up so everyone can see it in full. I've gone with Alex Meninga in goal. Right back, Bakary Sagna. Centre backs of Martin Keown and Steve Bold. Left back of Nacho Monreal. A centre midfield pairing of Edu and Gilberto Silva. On the right, I've gone with Walcott. On the left, I've gone with Ray Parlour. And up top, Olivier Giroud and Carnu. I don't think there's any of those players there that don't deserve to be in there. You might disagree and think that, oh my God, how can you underrate one of those players? I'm not saying they were poor players and that they were just told they were poor players, but I thought they were good. Quite the opposite. They were great players that I thought in some parts of their games were elite. So for me, that's why they made it in there. Absolutely superb. And I would say that even that 11 right now, looking at the way things are, back in the day, I think that would have given Premier League teams a hell of a nightmare in certain areas. Imagine having Giroud and Kanu with Walcott's pace and Parler's technical skill, Gilberto and Edu's stability, Sanya and Monreal bombing forward, while Keown and Bold are going to absolutely murder you at the back, and Meninga in goal, who I thought was so underrated and people forget about in that 97-98 season. So that's my 11. Guys, let me know yours. Please let me know yours in the comments. I'll be really interested to see who you'd go with. I'll be really interested to see who you agree and disagree with, because we're going to do one more of these tomorrow night. And that's going to be an interesting one as well. So, guys, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell. All those free things are absolutely free. If you want to come follow me, it's at DanArsenal87 on all socials. And until then, we'll see you next time. And up the Arsenal. Take care, guys.